Hi, I'm Leslie Maddox, and today I'm doing a review of a Kumon writing workbook for grade 1, along with my best tips and recommendations for using it. This book contains 36 lessons. These are all 36 lessons. They are 2 pages each, and so they're on facing pages. The lessons cover writing and grammar topics with increasing difficulty. Starts off with some vocabulary, and then it ends with some story writing, but this is very basic story writing. It's not anything in depth at all. This is more like an introduction, general introduction to story writing. And then there's an answer key at the back. So if I flip back here, we got simple sentences, invitation writing, thank you letters, story writing. You can see that most of the stories, they're just kind of adding words to the story. Review, and then an answer key at the back. While this is supposed to be a writing workbook, it is called writing, I felt that it was more of a grammar workbook with just a nod to writing. The reason I thought that is because you spend most of your time just going over grammar topics. It starts off with some vocabulary and sight words, and then you have punctuation, which is a writing topic, and which is appropriate, I think, for a first grader. And then you get into nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and not just general verbs and general pronouns, but it gets very specific about singular and plural, first person and third person, and then first, second, and third person. The verbs am, are, is. I feel like it starts off very simple with vocabulary, and it's like, oh yeah, this is very appropriate for a first grader. And then you have lots of vocabulary with increasing difficulty. You get into some sight words, like, okay, well that's first grade type work. And then suddenly it starts getting more difficult. For example, here we have our little don't forget sections. These are really important, and it tells you what the student's supposed to be working on in this topic. So this is talking about pronouns, and this one's simple. A pronoun is a word that stands for a noun. But then when we go further on, like talking about verbs, it says here, verbs in a sentence with a pronoun I are called first person singular verbs. Most first person singular verbs do not have an S at the end. And that seems like not a whole lot, but then we go into third person singular verbs, and I feel like it jumps in difficulty very quickly. That it made me wonder that, in some way I feel like this really isn't meant to be worked on by itself. Like this is better as a supplement to something else, some sort of language arts curriculum that that is more meaty than this, and that this would be better as a supplement, maybe as a resource to work on particular topics, as a way to solidify some learning. This might be better that way. Something else to note, that in the note to parents on the back of the front cover, it's a note to parents, and it tells you that this workbook is designed for students to work on their own. But I felt that the reading level that was required to even read the instructions sometimes was beyond even my advanced first grader. He reads at least a grade level ahead, and I felt like some of it was beyond him to do that. Particularly the don't forget sections. Those I felt are clear teaching topics where a parent or a teacher or a tutor or whoever would be reading those to the student and discussing it with them. Now my kids, they did love the little drawings and the simple activities. Once they become accustomed to the types of activities, they can work on their own. But the inconsistent difficulty level that was throughout this book, and then some of the advanced topics, made me question how effective it was for my students. As far as teacher prep goes, this would be an open and go workbook for most. But when it comes to some of the more difficult topics, like identifying verbs in a sentence, or pronouns, or first person, second person, third person, you may want to plan another helpful activity to introduce that grammar topic as it appears in the workbook. You could just wait till you get to that topic and see, is my student understanding this or not? But if you really want to kind of get ahead, you might want to look through here and see what the different topics are where you think there might be some issues and have something ready to go. As far as student time goes, the amount of reading required and the difficulty level of the reading on each page could mean that a first grader works on a 2-page spread, one lesson, for a solid 20 minutes to complete the lesson. If you have a really good reader who just reads things quickly and really gets this, and then they could work through a lot of this pretty quickly. But if they, as a first grader, if they're a true first grader and just being introduced to some of these topics for the first time, and they are on a true first grade reading level, then this will take more than a few minutes to do. All right, so who would I recommend this to? I would recommend this book to students that do well with the written word, since there is so much reading required to do each lesson, and which there should be. This is about writing and grammar and language arts in general. I would also recommend this book to students that prefer independent learning, since it is designed for students to work with on their own. So if they really could do this independently, if they don't need you to explain things to them, if they can go to these don't forget sections and read them and understand them, then they might really like this. Or if you're introducing these topics with one-on-one teaching time, they might really appreciate then getting the chance to just go off on their own if they're an independent learner and do this by themselves and just come to you for questions. If a student strongly prefers spoken word learning methods, this wouldn't be the perfect fit, but you can work through that if you're willing to sit and talk through all these topics with them. But in that case, you'd have to know ahead of time that this isn't going to be independent work where they're just off going and working on their own. I'm going to have to sit and work through these pages with them. Now for my best tips, my first tip for you is to decide how you want to schedule using this workbook up front. Since there are 36 lessons, if you schedule it, for example, your student to work out of it 3 times a week, like maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then they should complete this in a semester. And then maybe the other semester you could cover some other language arts topic. If you decide to use it, let's say once a week, you could then, for some of these abstract concepts, if you feel like it's going to be a little bit above their head, then you could plan to introduce those a new concept each week or every few weeks, and then just do one of these lessons once a week in the workbook, if that makes sense. That way, that's more of a kind of a gentle approach to it. That would mean some more planning ahead on your part, because you'd have to figure out how you're going to introduce those and look for other resources. Maybe go to Teachers Pay Teachers and look for some more hands-on interactive ways for students to learn some of these, like adjectives and verbs and nouns, some of these concepts. And then just use this workbook once a week so that it would last you for the entire school year. The other thing I would recommend is that to consider your students' reading level and their comfort with abstract concepts. If you consider that and think, wow, that my student is not quite at that reading level, or I think those concepts would be a real struggle for them, that might really shake your students' confidence. That could shake your confidence as a teacher too, when the truth is it just might be not appropriate for them yet. So you might want to consider using a workbook like this more, maybe waiting for grade 2. Don't look necessarily, in this case, at what grade level it says on the front cover. Consider your student in particular and think, would this be appropriate for my student right now, or is this just going to create more problems than it helps? So those are my best tips for you. If you're interested in seeing more reviews of books and workbooks and curricula, go ahead and tap on that link at the side. There's a playlist there where I'm putting all of these types of reviews. And I will talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.